Hello, my name is John Haskett. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief with Osceola County Fire Rescue, and I'm here today to talk about brush fire safety and awareness. As you might know, Osceola County is 1,530 square miles, and much of that is brush and pasture land where we have an issue with brush fires sometimes. So the way to safely deal with brush fires is one of the topics that we're going to go over today, and some of the benefits of brush fires. Some might not know, and we're going to go over that as well. So we'll begin with, if you've got a house that has woods or brush around it, you should pre-plan before the fire season and do some mitigation around your house, and we call that being Firewise. And the Firewise program is where we go and make sure that there's not brush right up to the house. You don't want trees that overhang the house being able to transmit fire above or into your house. The distances that the actual forest or wildland should be away from your house is at least 25 feet from anything that you're going to burn. So the house is going to be a problem in the wildland urban interface is what they call it, where we've got buildings and houses and people basically that like to park their house in a really wildland setting. So anytime we're doing any mitigation for the brush fire season, you should have all of the woods that you can and the high grasses that you can mowed down to where they're not going to cause you a problem if a wildfire were to approach your house. Some areas have homeowners deed restrictions, I guess it would be, where they like the look of the woods, and that can sometimes cause a problem. So for burning of yard waste, we'll talk about that for just a moment. 25 feet from any forest area is where you should be, just because you'll get embers that will transmit over into the bigger woods and cause a wildland fire. 50 feet from a roadway, because you don't want the smoke going over a roadway and causing a view or a visibility problem for drivers. You should be 25 feet away from your house if you're burning yard waste, so you don't have that same problem with it getting into any foliage that's around your house. And 150 feet from occupied buildings other than your own. If you're going to burn anything, you should call forestry and get a burn permit. And the burn permit doesn't cost you anything. You just call up the forestry number, and it's listed on the internet. If you type in Florida Forestry and then Osceola County, you'll get that number. They'll ask you these same questions. How far is it away from another structure that you're going to be burning? How far away from your own house? How far from the woods is it? And then they'll let you know whether or not that's a good idea. Part of the calculation of whether you can burn or not and get that permit that I was speaking of is going to be what the drought index is. The drought index is how dry the forest actually is. And so that's posted on the forestry's website. Sometimes you'll hear about it on the television news as well, where they'll talk about a fire danger, which is basically all the woods are dry and we shouldn't really be burning anything to mitigate that possibility of a brush fire or a wildfire. The other notch up above a fire danger type of a warning is a red flag warning. And a red flag warning basically has criteria like low humidity. So if you're walking through the grocery store and you go to touch the cart and you get that static electricity shock, that's where the humidity in the air is really low. And if that's low, then it's really a dangerous time for a brush fire if the forest is dry. Up above 500 on the drought index, it goes from 0, which is basically water, up to the 700-800 range. But 500 is where we start talking about limiting people on the ability to have a burn permit. So if you hear about that, the forestry supervisor won't allow you to have a burn permit for whatever you want to burn, it's probably because all that criteria has been met, and we're not really letting anybody burn, including the forestry guys who use fire as a mitigation for on land that ranchers and others use to not allow a large fire or a lot of vegetation to grow over years and years and years. And that will cause if it's not maintained, will cause a massive wildfire and possibly a conflagration, which is where it's almost impossible for us to stop that type of a fire. The benefits of prescribed burns, like I was just talking about, where the forestry will go out and they'll actually use a tractor and a plow to plow around the perimeter of an area that they want to burn. They'll make sure that the drought index is low enough, in the 300 and 400 range, to where we can have them burn the palmettos and the grasses, and that fire will go right through a standing pine tree area, and it won't kill the trees. Once the drought index gets up in the 700 and 800 range, which is really a dry area, then that's when the bigger trees catch on fire, and trying to stop that is almost, very difficult, if not impossible. You might be familiar with the California fires. They get that type of a drought condition. The big trees catch on fire, it gets up in the top of the trees, and it just, it's very difficult to stop. On top of that, they get a lot of wind, as we do, but they have seasonal winds that go up and down the mountains that cause them additional problems. So that's why they have some of the problems that you see on TV. Benefits of prescribed fire, where the forestry goes out and set the grass on fire on purpose. Fuel reduction, like I said, you don't want the palmettos and the grasses, in like the 15 or 20 foot, tall range, because it's just difficult to stop once it gets started. Site preparation, maybe they'll take and burn off an area in preparation for development. That occurs. That's another reason why you'll see the smoke in the area in the springtime. When it's raining like it is currently, and we're in April right now, the grasses will dry out after a little bit of rain, and they'll burn, but the other bigger trees and stuff won't burn. So that's why you'll see the smoke columns, and you may smell smoke in the area, but it's not a danger to anyone. Sometimes they'll use prescribed burning for disease control, wildlife management, and biological restoration. One of the interesting things about fire after it goes through an area, a pasture land, for instance, it will grow back greener than what it was originally. And that's because the remnants of the fire put nitrogen back in the soil, and nitrogen is just like putting fertilizer on your lawn at home. It'll actually help it. So back before we as humans started intervening in the fires, the grasslands and the palmettos were very low to the ground because lightning strikes would hit, and so naturally the forest would maintain itself, and it would burn those low-lying grasses and palmettos down and wouldn't affect the forest. So once everything starts turning green again and growing back, the animals, the wildlife, actually benefit from that type of a fire as well. So fire can be good if it's allowed to act naturally, and we don't have humans and buildings that interface with that. Once we start adding people and buildings and large properties, sometimes we have to take extra steps to make sure that those wildfires don't interfere with or hurt anyone. So that's a little bit about wildfires, and if you have any questions, you can certainly call Osceola County Fire Rescue at 407-742-7000, or you can call the local forestry office, and that'll be freshfromflorida.com, and go through their website, and you can get all the information you need on there. If you have additional questions, each county has a forestry supervisor that can be contacted for that information. As we get into April and May, we're going to be a little drier. Usually in the spring in Florida, we're a little drier than normal. And when we get into the tropical season, if you think hurricane season, you can just about think that we're going to get an abundance of rain during that time. So it's usually a good time to work on a defensible area around your house to where we cut back that forest and it doesn't have a chance to get close to the house if there is a wildfire. One of the things that transmits fire into a house from a wildfire is that it can break windows due to the heat, and it can also get up into the eaves. The soffits around your house are made to actually draw in air and into your attic space for air movement. If you get a wildfire under that area, it can actually get into the attic of the house, and that's where we see most of the fires go if there's a problem with a structure fire that's been set on fire by a wildfire. Fire.osceola.org is our website, along with our Facebook page, which is Osceola County Fire Rescue and EMS. You can also follow us on Instagram. And when we do have information, whether it's a traffic accident, it's a wildfire, it's a structure fire, we'll put out that information to help you navigate around that area and help you with your commute.